Hey, Jeff here. So I had I didn't want to show everything that I'd recently got in my last video, so I wanted to save some because these are kind of related. But I went after an album on Discogs, and basically what happened is I was involved in a video on another channel where we were talking about some of our favorite albums from like 1986, and this album came up. I had it on CD, and I just said, you know, I need to get a copy of that on vinyl, and I tracked it down because the album was only released overseas, and so I tracked it down, got it for a good price. But you know, when you're on Discogs, sometimes, at least I do, I go there and then you see, because you have stuff in your want list, you go there and it says this guy that you're buying from, you know, also sells these items that you are on your want list. So you go in there for one, you come out with many. That's kind of the thought of today. So the album that I went after is this album from 1986 by Motherlode. Now, I've heard of Motherlode over the years. Turns out, I always thought, you know, well, they were a band that had put out quite a few albums, but it turns out that there's different bands called Motherlode. And so this particular one had just put out this album in 1986, and they're a Swedish band, melodic, metal, you know, heavy at times, you know, the typical stuff that you would think from the 80s. Not, I don't know, some people may lump it into, I'd say melodic metal, hard rock. It's not really, you know, glam or any of that, but I mean, the band, you know, they have the look and everything. So, but I remember discovering this band around 87 or so through the underground, hearing things about it, because the singer Sonny Larsson, he did go on to work with some people that I'm familiar with. Bjorn Stixon from Leviticus, he was on his solo album. He's done some work along that lines, and then he later did join Bjorn Stixon in the XT project, which has released they released what three albums back in the day, and then they've released another 2 in the past couple years because they got back together. And so I've always, you know, I had was glad, you know, to have followed Sonny's work through this. Now, you know, now in hindsight, all these years later, when you're looking at this, it turns out this is a different Motherlode than all the other ones. And so they only had this album out, and then in 2010 the band, I guess, got back together, and they did put another album out only on CD. I have a digital version, haven't tracked down the CD because again it is overseas. In 95 there was a CD version of this particular Motherlode album, and it has actually 5 bonus tracks, which is nice. It's like having an entire new EP. So I've had this since the 90s, tracked it down. This may have even, no, this is a Swedish release too. I just don't know if any of this ever came out in the US, but I'd have to go back and look. But I've had that CD since the 90s, loved it. Went ahead and tracked this down, found a guy that had it for what I would consider a decent price for this type of an album. It's in pristine condition. I don't know, in Sweden maybe they had this label that they stuck over to hold the record in. I mean, that wasn't in there when I got it because it was busted, but I don't know if I could peel that off without messing up the picture. But you know, the album was in pristine condition, and yeah, sounds great. So, you know, it's not the it's not something that readily available, but you know, check it out. Go online, check out some Motherlode. They're good. 2010 release. Tomorrow Never Comes. Sounds, you know, fairly similar as far as their style. It's still kind of that style. So while I was, like I say, I went in there, and then it says, hey, this guy also has all these items from your want list. And when you start looking at that and saving money on shipping, and you start looking at the prices of some of the smaller stuff, I went ahead and added some items. I picked up the Impellitteri EP. This is the first EP, first album release by Chris Impellitteri. Of course, it's got one of my favorite singers on it, Rob Rock. And yeah, so you know, it was only a little bit more, and I went ahead and grabbed it. Sadly, it's side 1 plays fine, but side B, even though the album looks, I don't know, I have to double check it. I don't know what's going on. The album looks pretty much near mint, but for some reason, and there's no visible signs of any marks on here, but side 2, for like the whole first half of the song, it just keeps skipping, and there's not a single mark on here. I don't see any visible warbs, so I don't know. Maybe my needle was having a bad day when I was trying to play it yesterday. I'm going to check that out. It wasn't a ton of money, so you know, I'm not going to cry too much, but Most of the rest of the stuff that this particular guy was selling is all of the Christian pop persuasion. So these are bands that only a few of us are probably going to know about. Light Maneuvers by Servant. Now, I have most all of the early Servant catalog. They were kind of a 70s rock. They went into the 80s and kind of became pop. This is one of their pop albums. This has been one of the ones that I had back in the day. This and Swimming in a Human Ocean, which this particular seller did have, and I had it in my cart. I had put all this stuff in my cart and had it in there for weeks before I finally pulled the trigger on the Motherlode. But that one disappeared, and I'm like, dang. Because I think that is probably, Swimming in a Human Ocean is probably the only other Servant album on vinyl that I do not have that's available. I'll have to double check on that. But anyway, got this. I remember getting this back in the day when it came out. And anyway, yes, I got this and played it the other day, and it just flooded back the memories because, you know, back in the day we were playing a lot of heavier stuff, whatever was available, and then you had a lot of this pop stuff that also was great stuff back in the day. But I haven't probably listened to this album because I haven't had it. I don't even know if this was this ever on CD? I have to look that up. I don't think I've had a copy of this album since the 90s. No, it was great revisiting that. These next two is kind of a funny story. AD is Kerry Livgren from Kansas, former guitar player. He's back in Kansas, I think now, or he was for the, you know, in the past 10 years or so he's been back with Kansas. But he went solo. He had a solo album, then he started calling himself AD, and this would have been I always count his first solo album as kind of an AD album, but this would have been his third and fourth album, but it technically would have been the second and third AD album. This is about the time I discovered AD in my day, and the album was really weird at first. It's kind of, I mean, it's very AOR / rock. It's great stuff, but back in the day it wasn't quite heavy enough, but it seemed like I still listened to it to the point where it just got ingrained in me and ultimately became a favorite album of mine. This came out, it was a little bit more upbeat, and it just my love continued to grow. And so I believe I had mentioned these are the only other two vinyl AD albums that I needed. I'm almost sure I have them all. And the funny thing was, and if he's watching, don't even worry about it, it's so funny, but handful of years ago I ran across great copies of these like in a thrift store, and they were the only two AD albums I had. So I found somebody else in the VC had mentioned that they were the only two albums they didn't have on vinyl, and I thought, well, I'll send it to them. So I did, and I sent it out some VCLT because I thought, yeah, you know, I love AD, but I've got them all on CD, and chances of me ever getting the rest of them on vinyl, it just wasn't something I was going to go after, so I sent them away. Then later on, somebody sent me some VCLT with one, and then I bought another one, and then next thing you know, I'm like, oh, look, I've got everything except these two. So, you know, I just thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and get them. And again, the price was right, and when you buy them with this saving on shipping, it ended up being free shipping on all of that. So I think my collection is complete. I have to look. I believe I had got some VCLT from Jim on one of the ones that I honestly don't think I ever knew was on vinyl, and that blew my mind to have Prime Mover. So I had my AD collection was beefing up there. These other three releases are, so basically the Girder and Retroactive Records, you know, Boone's Overstock, things along that line. They were selling, they've been having sales recently, like the limited run vinyl was on, you know, cutback sale. They had Labor Day sale. They've had various sales over the past couple weeks, and I've just picked up a couple things for decent prices. This is one of the limited run vinyl. John Schlitt, singer for Petra, one of his solo albums. He's had a couple solo albums. This is his most recent. This was released on limited run vinyl a handful of months ago. It's on a beautiful blue and white swirl. And it just wasn't one of the ones at that point that I jumped on immediately. Funds, you know, one of those things. But ultimately, I mean, I love John Schlitt. I love Petra. I love all of that stuff. So I knew that one day I wanted to get it. So when the price dropped, when they had a sale, I had to jump on it. And it's a great album. You know, it's a typical, you know, pretty much a typical John Schlitt album. The style he does is more on a pop side with some grit at times, which is you know, really good. So yeah, and there's John Schlitt. So I had to pick that up at a good price. And then another one that they also dropped, and I think this one came out around the same. Well, yeah, whatever. This is another one, Idle Cure. I love Idle Cure. This is Inside Out. This is like their like 5th album, and it was one of the first ones I reissued on vinyl. And I would have to say, you know, when it comes to the whole catalog of Idle Cure, their first few albums are probably my favorite, and then they started going a little more AOR, a little more popish, a little more commercial. And this album would put into that category of being one of their more commercial, more laid-back albums. So I didn't jump on it immediately, but I wanted to eventually circle back to it. And then I kept having it in my cart, and I kept watching it on Girder, who put it out, and I kept watching it, and then all of a sudden Girder sold out. And I'm like, because they're limited run. I mean, there's maybe 100, 200, I don't know how many you printed this one, but, and then I'm like, oh, crud. You know, you wait, you lose out. Well, it turns out, you know, of course, I think Boone's Overstock had some copies, and they marked them down on sale too, so I grabbed it. Because I did not want to be totally left out. This was just something I just said, you know, these are actually selling for more than this online, and again, they marked it down. It's a picture disc of Saviour Machine, their 1990 demo, which I honestly don't know if I had back in the day. I had their first album, but I don't know if I ever had their demo, and this was reissued by Retroactive Records a handful of years ago on picture disc. I just never picked it up. I'm not a huge fan of theirs. I like their stuff. They've got a feel, you know, they're kind of a somewhat doomish at times, but anyway, they've put out a lot of stuff. I have almost everything they've got digitally, but I didn't jump on the actual picture disc until it dropped down to, like, what was they selling this for? Like, I don't know, it was under $20, I remember, because everything I bought was under that. So I grabbed it, and I believe yeah, anyway, so I went ahead and grabbed it. But that was all. Just wanted to grab that. Those are all miscellaneous things that I grabbed recently between the sales on the one site and from Discogs, and going after the Motherlode. I was going to call this going after one and coming out with the Motherlode, but I actually went after the Motherlode and came out with a bunch more. So I went after one and came out with many. It's the one and the mini. Anyway, I'll be back. Thanks for watching. Rock on and rock hard.